Most kills are done through crosshair placement. Let's get that out of the way. Crosshair placement on the surface level is a very simple concept. Aim at the head level, PvP when they enter your crosshair, easy kills. But that's simply not true. Many other things make up crosshair placement. It's not just the generic aim at the head level. It is a part of it, but there are other things that affect crosshair placement, such as reaction time, the angles you're holding, the elevation, pre-aiming, and pre-firing. It is the proper combination of all these factors that make up for good crosshair placement. It is a whole puzzle. We're gonna start with the most basic form and elements of crosshair placement, and then we're gonna ramp up. Here's a table of contents so you can just skip to whichever section you're interested in. Holding your crosshair at head level, starting with the generic one, because in all fairness, it is important. This one is pretty self-explanatory. You always want to keep your crosshair at head level, since that's how you get the most damage by hitting headshots. How do you know where the lead level is though? Well, there are two ways. The first way is to use the natural marker spread on the map. For example, each big box has the same height in this game. So you can use this line to know exactly where the head level is every single time you encounter one of these big boxes. The second way to determine the head level is always reminding yourself that the camera from which you see the game is actually around your neck or upper chest area. Which means that if you are looking perfectly forward, that means you need to raise your crosshair only a little bit and you are at the head level. But of course, this is affected by the distance that your enemy is at, even if you are on the same elevation. Here is an example. If the enemy is farther away from you, they will seem shorter and smaller, and you will need to aim a little bit lower than you would normally. Compare that to an enemy that's right in your face, where you actually have to aim a little bit higher. This section was focused on the horizontal head level. Check out the elevation section too, because I'll talk about elevation there on a deeper level. Reaction time. This is a big one, not because it's important, but because people think it's important. Everyone is so concerned with reaction time for whatever reason, and I'm here to tell you that as long as you don't have the reaction time of a sloth, you're fine. Some of you may or may not be familiar with CSGO. Simple is one of the best players of all time, and he has a reaction time that is indeed a bit above average at 190 ms. Keep in mind that he's also using OP, which actually does require some reaction time, but if you are mainly a rifle player, you can easily get away with a slower reaction time than that, and if your goal isn't to be literally one of the best players in the world, it will hardly affect you. It is very likely that most pros have better reaction times than the average, but not by a lot. And another thing to keep in mind is that Valorant also has lower movement speed values, making reaction time even less of a factor. How does this translate to crosshair placement? Well, you still need to react when someone peeks. And it is when you need to understand the concept of compensating for your reaction time. If you are sticking your crosshair to the corner of a wall like this, it is so unlikely that you will ever kill someone unless they are peeking with shift and they are completely unaware of your position. You will need to understand the skill level of your enemy. If the enemy is decent and usually checks corners, then you'd want to hold your crosshair a bit tighter, only a small distance from the corner, but just enough distance so you can react to it. But of course, he could be really bad or good, depending on the situation, and he could wide swing you, in which case you wanna hold wider. You can also get jiggled, but you really don't have to worry about that until you're like high diamond at least. About 95% of players will either swing or narrow pick the corner without putting much thought into it. One tip I can also give you to help you with your reaction time that seems to be largely unknown: make sure that your eyes, not crosshair, are always looking at the corner. This way you will react faster to someone picking. And make sure to not let your mind drift away. Move your eyes around the corner, because if you don't, you will react slower and you'll be surprised at how much faster your reaction time can be if you apply these two little concepts. Let's talk about angles. There are 4 types of angles: common angles, off angles, 90-degree angles, and slanted angles. Let's break down each with one exception. I'm only going to graze common angles because I'll fully talk about them in the picking section. A common angle is self-explanatory. Common positions people usually play on defensive side. These are the hardest angles to play in high ranks. Everyone knows how to pre-aim them and how to clear them. There is one advantage though. There are only so many ways you can get picked from. So in theory, every time someone picks a common angle, as long as they are not pre-aiming or pre-firing, you will always know where they're coming from. And if they're not pre-firing or pre-aiming, you might get a kill on them. But I wouldn't recommend relying on that because that's not something that's under your control, but you can be aware of it. I would instead recommend playing off angles though. When you're playing an off angle, you need to be aware that the enemy only has a vague idea of where you are, or he might have no idea at all. Which means that his pick will be less predictive so there is a negative to playing off angles. However, the benefit outweighs the negative. He will never be able to fully predict where you are, so his pre-aim will never be 100% accurate. He might be close to you, but you will still need to micro-correct most of the time. And if you are the one holding, you will always have a slight advantage over him. Try to put yourself in his shoes. You don't know where the enemy is exactly, you don't know that they're in the general area, but you don't know the exact position, so you have to be extra careful, and even then you are not guaranteed to get a kill. 90-degree angles and slanted angles. 90-degree angles are the worst angles to hold unless you are crossfiring with a teammate that can trade you off or the enemy has no idea where you are. If you're playing on Heaven for example, and you're sitting in this angle, you will get Ferrari picked faster than the speed of light. That's because it's first of all a common angle, and second of all, they can get to full lateral speed, so they will move fast and they will be hard to hit, but they can also pre-fire you, so you will have no chance to react whatsoever. This is where slanted angles come in. You can turn any 90-degree angle into a slanted angle. You can also consider them as off angle of some sorts, but a slanted angle is an angle that doesn't allow the enemy to get full speed, because to pick it properly they also need to move forward, which makes counter-strafing really hard. So to counter that, they will clear the angle a lot more slowly, or if they don't know that you are holding an off angle, they will just run into your crosshair while their crosshair placement of their own is bad, and they are forced to get an insane flick to kill you, while you can just click them and they're dead. Elevation. This is a quick concept. You need to always be aware of the elevation difference between you and the enemy, because based on that and on the way they pick, you will either have your crosshair set up correctly to get an easy kill, or you are forced to micro and you risk to die. Take a look at this clip and ask yourself, why was I holding the way I was holding? Okay, I was holding the far angle. I recommend you hold the far angle, not the close angle, because of 3 reasons. If they are picking from the far angle, you will see each other roughly at the same time. Gonna talk about this in a minute. But if he's picking close, you have a slight advantage where you can see him first, so you have time to adjust if needed. The second reason is a bit dependent on your mouse grip. I personally use claw grip, so for me it's much easier to move my mouse downward, and the last reason is that if you flick upwards and you miss your initial shot, it's gonna be awkward to then flick down again to try and compensate for the potential spray you are now forced to do since you've missed your first shot. While if you were to go from up to down, it wouldn't be as awkward since you are doing one motion instead of 2. Pre-aiming, pre-firing, and angle advantage. These are all part of picking. I've already covered the actual techniques of picking, such as wide picking and narrow picking, in my movement video, so it would make more sense to look at that video too before you watch this section, so you'll solidify your knowledge regarding picking, but I still need to readdress it in this video as well, because I haven't talked about pre-firing and pre-aiming, mainly because it makes more sense in the context of this video rather than that video. Anyway, to get there faster, you can check the card on the top right of this video. I've said that I'm gonna talk about common angles here. I'm going to introduce you to the concept of angle advantage, and I'm gonna keep it simple too. The player farther from the corner that they are picking than the other player will have a slight advantage. This works the other way around too. You don't have to pick someone. If you are holding an angle but they are sticking to the wall while picking you, you have a slight advantage because you'll see their model first. So the general rule is that if you are further from the wall compared to the enemy, you have an advantage. This is because the camera from where you see things in game is not inside your shoulders, it's inside your neck or upper chest area. So if the enemy is close to the wall, you will see their shoulders first, and only about after half of the body is visible is when they are able to see you. And also it works the other way around, so if you are picking, they will see your shoulder first. That's why you have to pick as far away from the corner as possible, so you can avoid that type of situation. Now that we know about angle advantage, we can move on. Playing a common angle is so hard because pre-aiming and pre-firing are a thing. Pre-firing is exactly how it sounds. You're pre-firing an angle. You wanna shoot after you're picking the corner the second you counter-strafe after you've pre-aimed it in a preemptive way to kill someone that's potentially holding the angle. And it can go the other way around. If you are holding, you can try and shoot and predict when the enemy are going to pick, but of course you can only do it on a defensive side if you hear the enemy is coming. Pre-aiming is a concept when you are pre-aiming an angle before you're picking it, with the expectation that your crosshair will land on the player playing the said angle. How do you get better at pre-aiming and pre-firing though? Bad news, it's a boring drill, but if you wanna learn pre-aiming and pre-firing efficiently, you have to go into a custom game on what map you wanna learn, and learn it mechanically. Sure, you can use markers and such, you can even use the in-game pinging system to help you out, but the good part is that after learning most angles in the game, you will get to a level where you are able to pre-aim accurately without putting much effort into it. I've talked about this in my 4 stages of competence and flow video and you can check that out. But basically, you will become really competent at this and you can create pre-aiming angles on the whim. Improving crosshair placement in general can be done in a custom game. However, the best thing you can do is that you focus on it when you're actually playing the game. If you do that for like a month straight, you will improve your crosshair placement tremendously. To clear up any confusions regarding pre-fire, you want to pre-fire an angle mainly when your position is already exposed, unless you have a really strong signal that someone is playing a certain angle, because if you are just pre-firing every single angle, you're gonna give away your position. So maybe in 1v1s, maybe 1v2s, or pre-firing common angles is fine, but be aware that your position will be exposed. As you play the game more and more, you will figure out when it's okay to pre-fire and when it's not. Thank you for watching, have a wonderful day.